Today, I passed out this thing last week with the family tree of Christianity. Well, the last time we were together. Today, what I'd like to focus on, at least to start with, is kind of the history of Lutherans in the United States, which is different from some of the other denominations, and I'll talk about some of the other denominations that I know a little bit about, so that you kind of get an understanding of the differences, at least in this country. Lutherans, as we noted last time, came northern Germany, Bavaria, the southern part of Germany, which was always more conservative. In fact, it is in Bavaria that Hitler got his start. That right-wing extremism kind of, that part of Germany was very conservative, very rural, and so Bavaria remained Catholic. But the rest of Germany was Protestant, mostly Lutheran, but also there were quite a few people from the Reformed tradition, and that's how and I'll get into that after a bit. So you've got Germany, some of the countries or the areas around Germany are on the edges, but then the Scandinavian countries, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Finland also became Lutheran. Something that's interesting about Sweden. Sweden was kind of late getting on the Lutheran bandwagon. The other countries had kind of gone Lutheran before Sweden did. But when Sweden went Lutheran, some of the bishops also became Lutheran. Everywhere else where Lutheranism took over, the bishops remained loyal to Rome. But in Sweden, the bishops became Protestant, Lutheran. And so, Sweden remained a tradition of apostolic succession with its bishops. Now let me explain apostolic succession, because this comes up in later Lutheran and other church cooperation and agreements, especially with the Episcopal Church. Apostolic succession is the notion that cannot be proved, by the way, but it is the understanding that bishops were consecrated by laying on of hands, and so the current bishop had hands laid on him by an existing bishop, who had hands laid on him by an older existing bishop, who had hands laid on him by an older existing, and going all the way back to the apostles. Hence the term apostolic succession. The bishops are in line from the original consecration of bishops. Now, it gets tricky because in the early church, while even the Bible talks about bishops, presbyters, clergy, regular clergy, and deacons, there is no, the way those different functions of ministry have developed later, we don't know whether that was the case in the early church. Bishops kind of became bishops by being the head pastor in a large community, the most respected clergy person. And so it's murky, and apostolic succession cannot be proven. Even though you can go a long way back, but in the early church it really gets muddy. So, but Sweden their bishops remained in apostolic succession, and they continued that tradition. Bishops laid hands on new bishops, and historically it took 3 bishops to make a bishop. That's why the Episcopal Church in the United States, the Anglican Church from England, they had an awful time because anybody who wanted to be a priest, they had to send back to England until they could get 3 bishops move to the United to the colonies from England, and they finally did that, and so then they were able to establish apostolic succession and ordain clergy in the New World.
So when you're ordained as a pastor in the Lutheran
Right.
faith, they lay hands on you, is that correct?
That is correct.
That is correct?
And historically, the laying on of hands for Lutherans was done by other clergy, because that was Luther's compromise. I mean, because there were no bishops that became Lutheran, he said we're going to have clergy do the laying on of hands. And historically, up until real modern times, including when I was ordained by other clergy, not by bishops.
Aren't bishops just a higher rank of clergy?
Yes, essentially. And the bishop's role is different than clergy. Clergy, regular clergy, I should say, they're all clergy. Clergy serve congregations or chaplaincy kinds of ministries. Any clergy person can be a chaplain in a hospital or in the military or those kinds of things. Bishops have, over the years, developed a very specific role, and that is to be pastor to the clergy who are in their diocese. And I'll use that term diocese, which is the Roman Catholic and Episcopal name for what we call a synod.
Yeah.
We have bishops, and when the agreement with the Episcopal Church happened back in the 90s, the Episcopal Church wanted, because we can exchange clergy with the Episcopal Church. If I ever get my credentials recognized in the ELCA, I could serve at Grace Episcopal. I could also serve at Broadway United Methodist.
But not the other Lutheran churches?
Not the other Lutheran churches in town.
Sort of
I could go out to St. Matthew by the Lake. They're
that kind of seems
ELCA.
backwards where
One would think so. One would think so, that we can have an agreement with the Methodist, the United Presbyterian, the Presbyterian Church in the United States, the PC, the USA. We could serve ELCA clergy can serve there. Methodist Church, the United Church of Christ.
is that the one that
Which is here, the UCC, and of all things, two of the North American divisions of the Moravian tradition. It's hard to track that one down, but Moravians come primarily from Eastern Europe.
so it's like Orthodox.
No, they're not Orthodox. They are Protestant, and developed a little. Actually, some of them trace their background to Huss, who was burned at the stake. So that the Reformation in Eastern Europe had started a little before it really took off with Luther and Zwingli and other leaders of the Protestant Reformation. But when the Lutherans and the Episcopalians got talking, the Episcopalians were really insistent on apostolic succession. So the requirement, once the agreement was made, we are going to share clergy. What the agreement was, every Episcopal bishop that is consecrated has to have at least one ELCA Lutheran bishop to participate in that consecration. And every Lutheran bishop that got consecrated had to be consecrated by at least one Episcopal bishop. That was to get that apostolic succession. We could have had somebody come over from Sweden, or of all places, Tanzania. And that is because most Tanzanians, by the way, that are Christian, are Lutheran.
Well, good for them.
because Tanzania was the missionaries that went there were Swedes.
So do the other Lutherans have that?
Apostolic succession? No.
So like the Missouri one, whatever the one is.
Missouri, Wisconsin, the folks next door over here.
Yeah, see.
The one on Jefferson?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So the ELCA has reestablished apostolic succession. I argued clear back when the ELCA was formed, we should do that at the time, but nobody was listening to me. The ELCA officially has only one order of ministry, and that is clergy. Bishops are just a specialized, we don't have the same distinction of bishops, clergy, and deacons that the Episcopal Church or the Roman Catholic Church has.
And Methodist got that division?
Well, interestingly enough,
Churches have elders.
yeah, and in the Episcopal or the Methodist Church, if I remember this correctly, you're first ordained as a deacon, and then ordained as an elder.
And when you say Methodist, you mean you're
United Methodist Church.
Not the other Methodist.
The United Methodist Church, yeah. There's some branches off.
And the bishops in the United Methodist Church are not a distinct order of clergy.
That's right, right. And it is true that even in the ELCA, they're not a distinct order of clergy. They are just clergy.
So
We don't title in the Episcopal Church. A bishop is referred to as the Right Reverend.
Yeah.
In the ELCA, the bishop is just the Reverend so and
So
so.
who's the wrong reverend?
There isn't one. Well, I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are, and I have been called that from time to time. But there isn't a title like that. And in the Episcopal Church, I came from a cathedral. The senior pastor in a cathedral in the Episcopal Church. This is not a cathedral. But the senior pastor in the Episcopal Church in a cathedral is called a dean, which sounds really academic.
Mm-hmm.
That's because it was academic. Every cathedral in England had a school, and the senior pastor at a cathedral was the dean of the school.
So like that, what is it, Westminster? Where the Queen gets married?
Well, Westminster
That's
is the Westminster Abbey in London is the royal church.
So they have the school too?
Yes, I believe they do.
Oh. I wish I went there.
They also have a fabulous choir,
Yes, they
which
do.
I'm sure they pay very well.
Yes.
You can do that when you pay people well enough. Anyway, that's a kind of a broad and maybe over more information than you needed. But every denomination has its tradition of ordering clergy in terms of not ordering them around. Historically, this used to fascinate me as a Lutheran. It used to be in the Methodist Church, every 2 years pastors were moved.
Yep.
Always the first Sunday or first week in June, I believe. Mayflower Moving had a contract with the United
No,
Methodist.
it was in October because I
Oh, it was
was
in October.
disrupted in school.
Oh, that's right.
And
Okay,
then
so it
they
was in the
changed it to June, 15 years.
fall. Okay, that's where I got that in my head then. But like I say, every church orders its ministry in its own, and having to do with the polity of the church. For example, in the United Church of Christ, some of their background, there's the evangelical and reformed tradition, which is what this group actually was, coming from Germany. But an awful lot of the United Church of Christ was made up of the Congregationalists. Congregationalists were split off from the Anglican Church in England, and that created the Puritans. The Puritans and what we also call the Pilgrims, they're part of the same group. They left the state church in England and came to this country for religious reasons. They wanted to go somewhere where there was no pressure to be a part of the state church, which there was strong pressure in England. And they were seen as heretics. The United Methodist Church also comes out of the Anglican Church, because because John and Charles Wesley were both Anglicans. John Wesley never intended to start another church. He wanted to do reform from within the church, kind of like Luther in the Catholic Church. But when he got to the United States, or the New World, I should say, the dynamics changed, and the Methodist Church was born in this country, not in England, but in this country, but rooted in the Anglican tradition. Old Methodist churches oftentimes have AME on their cornerstones.
Yeah.
American
Methodist Episcopal.
Methodist Episcopal
Yeah.
Church, making clear that connection to the Anglican tradition.
Isn't there one called African Methodist?
Okay,
Yeah.
the African Methodist Episcopal Church started because African Americans, both slave and free, had to sit in the balcony in their churches. And they got tired of that and decided to form a denomination that was exclusively African American. And the AME Church of all the African American denominations, and there are lots of them. Church of God in Christ. You get in black neighborhoods in big cities, you'll start to see some of the same letters on storefront churches, and you get to recognize them. But the AME Church, there's a big one here in Paducah,
Yeah.
down on
7 Birch Chapel.
yeah, big old historic African American church.
St. James is a central Methodist Episcopal, which is another black Methodist.
Okay, yeah, and we could get into all those African American.
And shrinking.
What's that?
Protestants just keep breaking apart, forming these churches.
Historically, we've gotten better at it, but still, and we'll get into this with Lutherans in America. We got to get back to Lutherans. All these ethnic groups, when they immigrated to this country, tended to settle together. The corner of Illinois where I came from, somebody from Germany, the old story was that northwestern Illinois, Joe Davies County, because Illinois was founded in 1818, 200 years old this year, said, because English had originally settled in that area, but they said, the locals said, eventually this county is going to be taken over by Germans and Kentucky bluegrass. Because bluegrass was not native, but it thrived up there, and so bluegrass still grows wild in northwestern Illinois. But that was typical. Somebody from somewhere in the old country gets settled somewhere, and then anybody that knew them back in the old country that wanted to immigrate contacted them and came and settled in the same area. So that's the history. Early on, a bunch of Germans settled in Pennsylvania. They became known as the Pennsylvania Dutch. Not because they were Dutch. It's because nobody could pronounce Deutsch, which is German. Pennsylvania Dutch were German.
And they ran the stairs up to look the window out.
Yes.
The engine coming down.
And they'll shut the gate wide open.
Yes. They run the stairs up to look the window out to see the engine coming down.
Well, don't you?
So,
The Swedes tended to settle together. Norwegians tended to settle together. In South Dakota, there's an area that was heavily settled by Germans, but most of South Dakota was settled by Norwegians primarily, and a few Swedes. And there's one community not far from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, that's very Danish. They have Danish days every year. But again, that history of settling together in areas, that had to do with how we got so many Lutheran groups. Even if they settled in the same area, the people that spoke Norwegian couldn't understand the people that spoke German. And so they formed separate groups. And those groups tend to be relatively small because of transportation in the early America. If you gotta go by horse, it takes a while. And so these were not large geographical areas. And so there were oodles and oodles and oodles of synods. When transportation got a little better and a little easier, those synods, at least the ones that spoke the same language, tended to work together. But this is speaking the same language. Clear until the mid-50s, my home church in northwestern Illinois had a German service once a month. My grandmother, when she prayed the Lord's Prayer to herself, prayed it in German.
Even during the 40s?
Even during the 40s. And even during the teens. And the church, one of the churches I served in South Dakota, was a merger between a German group and a Norwegian group. Mm-hmm. But that merger didn't happen until after the First World War. No one was still alive that remembered the First World War. But one of the very first stories I heard in that church was that someone during the First World War had painted the church yellow. And there was a rumor that the pastor, who spoke German, was a German spy. During the First World War. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the first stories that I heard when I went to that church, even though there was still no one alive that could remember that story. The story was very much alive in that congregation.
Reminds me of that ladder in the church in Israel, in Jerusalem.
In the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because nobody has the authority to go take it down.
Yes.
So it gets left there.
Put back there if it's stolen.
So historically, I mean, even from almost the earliest days, there was a movement towards merger amongst Lutherans to get larger and larger groups. But some of them, and who knows why this happens, immigrant groups, sometimes weird things happen with them. A group of Anabaptists came to this country, and they froze their tradition in the time they moved here. They still drive horses. They're called the Amish. Why did they didn't get stuck in biblical times.
No.
So like when they say they don't like technology from before.
From the time they came here on. Their resistance to technology, they'll drive a buggy. But when they came here, that got frozen somehow or another. Old Order Mennonites will drive a car, but they look like Amish the way they dress.
Is it a horseless carriage from like the early 1900s?
Yeah. I mean, how does this stuff get figured out? Who knows? Unless you're in the middle of it. But that freezing in time happens with some immigrant groups, not all. The Amish are probably the prime example of that, but there are other groups. And in South Dakota, there's a group of Anabaptists who were followers of a guy by the name of Hutter. They are known as Hutterites. And they live almost like Amish, but they embrace modern technology, except for the way they dress.
What's the one in Grace County?
That's local, I don't know. But they also kind of get, but they live communally.
They're Yoders.
They're
all Yoders.
Well, and over there are some Amish in that part of Illinois. So anyway, it happens. It also happened apparently, weirdly enough, among some Lutherans, because the theology of the Wisconsin Synod Lutheran Church, and to some extent the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, are very 19th century, the theology. And when the old American Lutheran Church and the old Lutheran Church in America started to embrace more modern ways of looking at Scripture and all of that, Missouri Synod split over that because they accused, right up here in St. Louis, they accused the instructors at the seminary were accused of heresy, but the church wouldn't say who was a heretic or what the heresy was.
Oh.
And so what happened up in St. Louis at Concordia Seminary was that the students, almost to a person, voted to leave. And said, if we're being taught by heretics, there's something wrong, and if the church will not tell us who the heretics are, there's also something wrong. We're going to do something else. And the next day, the faculty met and voted to leave, leaving behind their pensions. That was a courageous thing to do.
So even the heretic left.
The heretics, all of them. And only 2 or 3 professors remained loyal to the Concordia Seminary. Interestingly enough, the seminary I attended in Paducah, Iowa, is called Wartburg Seminary. It is it's a takeoff on Wartburg Castle. Tony's been there with me. It's very much like a castle. It's built out of stone, and the tower that sits between the chapel and the refectory is an exact, in terms of its size, copy of the tower at Wartburg Castle in Germany.
What's the refectory?
Refectory is the root word is the same root as refreshment.
Mm-hmm.
Give you an idea what.
It must be a saloon if it's European.
No, not quite. It's the dining hall.
Oh, well.
Refectory. Refectory is a religious term for dining hall.
I thought monks make beer, so.
Well, and Wartburg Seminary definitely, being German, Oktoberfest consumed a great deal of beer, but that's
My
neither.
paternal grandmother, German and Lutheran, and my paternal grandfather was Southern Baptist. And so they started going to First Christian Church Disciples of Christ together.
But what's interesting about that seminary, and I've given you way more information than you really need, there is a copy of the big statue from Erfurt, Germany, of Martin Luther with this massive Bible in his arm, with one hand on it, the "Here I Stand" statue. We have a copy of that statue, the full-size copy. He always ended up for Texas barbecue with an oversized cowboy hat on his head, and in the wintertime somebody would knit a huge stocking cap. But the same statue is at Concordia Seminary, the Missouri Synod Seminary in St. Louis.
The same statue.
Exact same statue.
Stole the statue?
No, they're 2 statues, but they're identical.
But one's in
One's
Concordia.
One's in Concordia in St. Louis, one's in Dubuque, Iowa.
And one's in
Wartburg.
But
Wartburg.
different outlooks from either one.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the thing. The one at Wartburg faces the street, and the one at Concordia faces inward towards the building.
Yeah.
And the joke, back when it was possible to joke with the Missouri Synod about things, because back in the 50s it looked like the Missouri Synod and the old American Lutheran Church, which is what Wartburg Seminary was, were going to merge. They were in serious conversations about that, and the joke was, Concordia would say, Luther's turned his back on Wartburg, and Wartburg would say, he did that because he could trust us. But by the early 70s, the old American Lutheran Church and the Missouri Synod were no longer talking to each other, because the American Lutheran Church had ordained women. Women couldn't even vote in the Lutheran Church of Missouri Synod, let alone be pastors.
And which one aligns with the European?
Well, none of them. All of them have agreements with European Lutheran groups. I went to seminary with students from Europe.
So there's not one overall Lutheran in Europe.
There is no. Yeah, we are not. Lutherans are not like the Roman Catholic Church, where if you're Roman Catholic, you're Roman
The
Catholic.
Anglican Church is pretty centralized too.
Not nearly as centralized as.
Well, not as a Catholic.
Not nearly as much as the Catholics. The Anglican Church, they communicate with each other, but the Anglican Church in each country is independent. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who is the head of the Anglican Church in England, is viewed as the head of the Episcopal Church in the United States, but has no authority.
I thought the Queen was.
Well, in England,
Oh.
In England.
So it's really confusing.
yeah. Technically, and we always laughed when the Anglican Church finally started ordaining women, because for years the actual head of the Anglican Church was the Queen,
Yeah.
which is kind of funny because they fought tooth and nail against ordaining female clergy. They eventually got around to it, but yeah, the monarch of England is the titular head, and by titular I mean the title, the head of the Church of England. So right now it happens to be the Queen. So that's, again, we've kind of gone around in circles with it. I'm going to pass out this sheet. It's Lutheran denominations in the United States. I don't know whether it's exhaustive or not, but it's fairly exhaustive. I do want to point out some of these. You will see several items that were founded in 2001. You'll see the Association of Independent Evangelical Lutheran Churches on the very first page. On the second page, on the bottom, the Fellowship of Confessing Lutheran Churches, founded in 2001. And on the back page, Lutheran Congregations for Mission in Christ, which is what the one over here is, founded in 2001.
Now, which one, Lutheran Congregations in Mission for Christ, that's what Amazing Grace is.
That's what Amazing Grace is, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
There's also Lutheran Evangelical Protestant Church, founded in 2001, has all 44 congregations. And then on the very last page, Lutheran Orthodox Church, founded in 2001, 89 congregations.
That's the one with the Orthodox?
No.
Autocephaly?
No, they're just calling themselves Orthodox.
Of course.
Because they believe that they're the ones that are holding the Orthodox faith. 2001. Does anyone know what happened in 2001?
Odyssey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
that is-
ELCA,
I know what it.
yes, the ELCA embraced having gay partners. And there were congregations that left the ELCA over that decision. That was 2001. That's why all those little, for the most part, little groups, 89 congregations, 117 congregations, 44 congregations,
One or two.
55, yeah, and one of them has 2 congregations,
Yeah.
7 congregations. So even the people who were dissatisfied couldn't quite pull it together to join one. And there were already some Lutheran churches that in existence that would have fit their views, like the Evangelical Free Lutheran Church. And some congregations actually did join the Evangelical Free Lutheran Church. But the issue in 2001 was gay clergy. Openly gay clergy. There's always been gay clergy.
Well, yeah.
And when I was in seminary, they didn't care if you were gay, as long as if you were gay, you had to promise to be celibate. And I said, not me. There's also another 7 congregation group on the second page, on the right hand side of the first page, right in the middle. It's called the Evangelical Lutheran Conference and Ministerium of North America,
Yes.
founded in 1992. They
Now,
got their start when the ELCA and the Episcopal Church made this agreement. They were dead set against that, doing this apostolic succession business and all that. They just don't want anything to do with it. And so that, I just pass that out. That shows you the Lutheran groups in the United States.
So when was Apostolic Lutheran Church of America founded?
It doesn't have a date there.
no,
Only one without one.
Maybe apparently the people who put this together didn't know, and I certainly don't. I am going to pass around another list, one that has, send this both ways and hang on to one of them. So, one has world religion. It has U.S. Christian denominations on the left, world religions on the right. And somewhere I've got, this sheet tells you the numbers in each Lutheran denomination, or each Lutheran. There are 9 million Lutherans in the United States.
I really thought there was more than that.
Only 9 million. Catholic, there are 60 million. The Catholic Church is one of the few and I use the term evangelical in the sense of really out there knocking on doors and non-evangelical group that's actually growing. But the reason the Catholic Church continues to grow in the United States is because of the Hispanic influx of the Hispanic folks. Otherwise, the Roman Catholic Church would also be declining. And all mainline churches are in decline. Methodists and Wesleyans, there's 13 million of those. Now they put the Methodists and Wesleyans together. I wouldn't do that. The Wesleyan Church is very different from the United Methodist Church. But 30 million Baptists.
Yeah, that seems small.
Just half the size of the Roman Church.
It seems like that's awful small.
It does, but there's places in the country where Baptists are stronger than other parts of the country. Around here, they're stronger, and further south you go, the stronger they get. But only 5 million Pentecostals and charismatic churches, 4 million Orthodox, 4 million Presbyterian, 3 million Episcopalians or Anglicans. That includes a few break-off groups from the Episcopal Church in the United States. Congregational United Church of Christ, 2 million, that's a small group. Assemblies of God should be included in the Pentecostal group.
just saying, more Pentecostal Christian,
Yeah.
still.
I was
Well,
thinking the very same thing.
I find these statistics, all of them, a little bit scary in reality. Now, worldwide, then, if you look at Christianity, is the largest religious body. I mean, all Christians together is 2 billion. As compared to the big fuss about Islam. Well, they're strong. They're 1.3 billion, but there's not nearly as many of them as there are Christians.
But they're growing in Europe.
Well, again, that's primarily because of immigration.
But Christianity is shrinking in Europe.
That's right. In practice, Christianity is shrinking in Europe, but what you find is that in Europe, because of the state church system, many people will say, if you ask them, they'll say they're Christian. They don't go to church. Church attendance in Europe is appalling, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But it has to do with the state church, although they will, like Norway, everybody will say they're Lutheran. But they don't necessarily go to church. They'll have the next generation baptized. But that's, that'll be the only time they go to church or baptized and confirmed.
What's JUCHE?
There's a couple there that I
That's the
didn't even know.
religion, that's the state basically creates the DPRK for North Korean.
Oh, okay.
Basically self-reliance.
And Jainism?
Jainism, it's Japanese, I
Okay.
believe.
I think it was that.
And again, I don't necessarily know a lot about these different groups, but
The Jainism one? I
Um,
think so. Isn't Jainism the ones that who honor all life, they'll try not to accidentally step on a.
I confess, I don't know.
It sounds Asian-y. It sounds
Well,
like
and
some of the Buddhists
Hindus to some extent are that way.
Yeah.
and Shinto kind of sounds like those.
Interestingly enough, there's only 1 million neo-pagans.
Mm,
I find that surprising. And probably most of them are in the United States and Europe.
Probably.
they don't last long in the Middle East.
Judaism
Judaism,
is way down the list.
yes. Partly because of World War II.
Yeah.
There's more now, I think, than there was before World War II. But they would have grown more.
They've grown back some, but they have always been a very much a minority religion.
That's because they don't proselytize.
That is partly true. That's partly true. That is one of the reasons. Okay, so that's in the United States. Lutherans, to go back to this, immigrated here, settled in small communities, formed small denominations, and it's been a history of putting those together. The different ethnic groups. Once everybody started speaking English, it made it a lot easier to combine groups. But then they got into doctrinal issues like the Missouri Synod and the Wisconsin Synod. Good heavens. The Wisconsin Synod, they don't even talk about the ELCA. They talk about the Missouri Synod and think that the Missouri Synod are so loose and go all of them. They may not be in hell yet, but they've got one foot in hell and the other foot on a banana peel.
Yeah.
So what was the doctrinal dispute for the one in Jefferson Street?
That was the ordination of openly gay partner clergy.
Okay, and that broke off from
When-
this.
That broke off from this church. Probably most of the churches that split off or split down the middle or the entire church left the denomination, usually it was not just, there had been a list of grievances that had been building up for a long time, including the agreement with the Episcopal Church, by the way. But the ordination of women, the whole move towards biblical critical method and all of that stuff. So when the ELCA chose to say, okay, we're going to ordain openly gay partnered clergy, that was really the straw that broke the camel's back. It was not the only issue.
On the table.
Yeah, my home church. Here's my brother, who's the head of the president of the church council in my home church, and there's somebody on the council who's strongly arguing to leave the ELCA. But one of his arguments was they were tired of paying part of their money towards the ELCA, towards the Synod. Well, when I got looking at it, every other Lutheran group required some kind of giving to the Synod or the denomination of one way or another. And of course, my brother, knowing me, was rather offended by this guy who was trying to split the church up. Their church did not split. That individual and his wife eventually left the congregation. No one else
But that's the
did.
way it should be, I mean.
Well,
Just,
exactly. Yeah.
if you can't, then that's not the place for you.
That's-
I mean, one of the first things I've always asked is, do they ordain women, and do they send anybody to hell? I mean, because that's not the place of the church.
That's not the church, and I agree.
So that's between God and the
That's
individual.
between God and, yeah, exactly.
So, I won't.
Yeah. I wanted to pull us back and just kind of recap some things. The history of Lutheranism in the United States, is this business of immigrants and putting groups together, and then groups splitting apart again. But, and I think we'll stop for today. Next, I'm going to get to Lutheran theology eventually, but I would like, for next time, we're going to look at Lutheran worship.